3 hours of darkness fell at noon. 3 languages named the crime on the sign above his head. 3 times Pilate said the man was innocent. 3 groups mocked him as he hung there. 3 days later, the tomb was empty. You've heard the Passion narrative enough times that these details slip past. They feel like background. But when a first-century Jewish writer places the number 3 in a story, he is not decorating. He is signaling. And the 4 Gospel writers place this number into the crucifixion account not 3 times or 4 times, but so consistently that when you list every instance in order, the pattern is not subtle, it is architectural. The Passion narratives in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were written between roughly 65 and 95 AD, each for a distinct community. Mark wrote for Roman Christians under persecution. John wrote for a Greek-speaking diaspora church, beginning to understand Jesus as the divine Logos. But all 4 writers, working independently with different sources and different audiences, saturate their crucifixion accounts with the same number. This is not because they were simply copying each other. Matthew and Luke likely knew Mark's account. John almost certainly did not use the others as sources, and yet the pattern holds across all 4. To understand why this number matters, we need to start with the world these writers inhabited. In the Hebrew scriptures, the number 3 is the number of divine confirmation and completion. Not 7, which signifies fullness, but 3, which signals that something is certain, finalized, ratified by heaven. Hosea 6 verse 2 uses it for resurrection. Abraham walks 3 days to reach Moriah. Esther waits 3 days before approaching the king. This is the grammatical world these writers were thinking in. Let's read what the texts actually say, in order. The night before the crucifixion in Gethsemane, Jesus prays 3 times, and returns to find the disciples asleep 3 times. Matthew 26 records this with precision. Each prayer, each return, counted. Peter, James, and John, 3 disciples chosen to watch. Before dawn, Peter denies Jesus 3 times. Mark 14 and Matthew 26 both record the exact structure. Once at the courtyard gate, once by the fire, once challenged a 3rd time, and then the cock crows. When Jesus arrives at Golgotha, Mark 15 verse 25 gives the time. It was the 3rd hour when they crucified him. 3 crosses stand on the hill. Jesus and 2 criminals, 1 on each side. 3 groups mock him. Passers-by who shake their heads, the chief priests and scribes, and the criminals crucified with him. Matthew 27 lists all 3 distinctly. At the 6th hour, noon, darkness falls. It lifts at the 9th hour. That is 3 hours of darkness over the land. Mark 15:33 records this without comment, as though the darkness requires no explanation. In Luke's account alone, Pilate declares Jesus innocent 3 times, in chapter 23, verses 4, 14, and 22. 3 declarations. 3 times the Roman governor says, "This man has done nothing wrong." John's Gospel adds 1 more. The sign above the cross was written in 3 languages, Hebrew, Latin, and Greek. John 19:20 says the chief priests objected to the wording. Pilate said, "What I have written, I have written." 3 languages. Every literate person in Jerusalem could read it. And beneath all of this, the prediction Jesus made in John 2 verse 19, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." So that is what the texts say. Now, what does the tradition do with this? Origen, writing in Alexandria in the 3rd century, was among the first to work through the Passion narrative systematically. For Origen, the repetition of 3 was not numerology, it was testimony. In his commentary on Matthew, he argued that the 3-fold structure of the crucifixion narrative echoes the 3-fold witness required by Mosaic law for any claim to be valid. Deuteronomy 19:15, "A matter shall be established by 2 or 3 witnesses." The narrative itself was constructed as a legal witness. Augustine, in his later writings on the Psalms, went further. He read the 3 days in the tomb alongside the 3 days of Jonah in the fish, and behind both, Hosea 6 verse 2, "After 2 days he will revive us. On the third day he will raise us up, that we may live before him." The 3-day pattern was not invented for Jesus. It was already waiting in the prophets. At the Council of Nicaea in 325, the bishops did not simply say he rose from the dead. They said, "On the third day he rose again, in accordance with the Scriptures." That phrase, "in accordance with the Scriptures," points directly to this textual tradition. The Creed does not name which Scriptures. Every participant knew. Thomas Aquinas, in the Summa Theologica, asked directly, "Why the third day? Not the first, not the seventh." His answer was careful. The third day is close enough to the death to prove the resurrection is real, and far enough that no witness could mistake the face they were seeing. The timing was not arbitrary, it was chosen. How does a believer live with this? The discipline this pattern calls for is one the medieval church called Lectio Divina, sacred reading. Not reading for information, but reading for encounter. Slow enough to notice structure, patient enough to count. Most of us read the Passion narrative the way we read a news article, scanning for the story, catching the main event. The crucifixion, the death, the resurrection, and the structural details, the 3 hours, the 3 languages, the 3 denials, become background noise. But the writers of these Gospels were not journalists. They were theologians writing under extreme compression. Every detail they included cost something: papyrus, time, and the real political risk of circulating a document about an executed man. If they counted 3, they meant you to count 3. The practice this invites is simple. Take one chapter of a Gospel this week and read it 3 times. Not once, 3 times. On the third reading, count. Count names, count hours, count denials, count what you stopped noticing because you thought you already knew the story. This is not a technique for academic study, it is a practice of attention. And attention, in every tradition, is the beginning of prayer. We started with a pattern: 3 hours of darkness, 3 crosses, 3 languages, 3 denials, 3 days. What the layered reading shows is that this is not coincidence, and it is not decoration. It is a deliberate structure placed by writers who lived inside a symbolic world where the number 3 meant God has spoken and the witness stands. The question to sit with: what else have you stopped counting because you thought you already knew the story?